being in a sort of a harsher environment strips everything else away, so you can kind of easily get into like the essence of, you know, who you are without like sort of the superficial stuff around it.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm very excited to be here at Kendal Mountain Festival with the super talented mountain runner Hillary Gerardi.
Hi Anna, I'm so happy to be here.
So for people who don't know you, could you just introduce yourself and tell everybody what you're doing at Kendal this year?
Sure. So, well, I'm Hillary Gerardi, and I like to call myself a mountain endurance athlete. I mostly do run in the mountains, but I also like to ski and do other things. And I'm here this year to be presenting my film Always Alive, which talks about my fastest known time speed record on Mont Blanc, which I set last year.
Fantastic, thank you. And has the outdoors always been part of your life? How did you get into it?
I grew up in a really rural area in the U.S., and so I spent tons of time outside, and so it was a really big part of my life, you know, strong contact with the natural world. Mountain sports wasn't exactly something until that really came into my life a bit later, but definitely the outdoors I've been passionate about for a long time.
You haven't always been a runner. It's actually quite recently, it sounds like, that you've managed to train to get to that incredible achievement of the fastest known time of Mont Blanc. So tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, well, I was always sort of an athlete. I was a gymnast growing up, and I loved spending time in the mountains and working in mountain huts. And we used to sort of like run around hut to hut whenever we had free time, except that it was actually hiking, or at least I thought it was hiking. I had no idea it was running, and I thought that running was running on roads, and that seemed boring to me. I wasn't really interested, and it wasn't until relatively recently, I mean, at this point, about 12 years ago, that I started to get a bit more into running following a mountain accident. And I think that, you know, it's just, I increasingly found, well, that I wasn't too bad at it, but also that it just brought me a lot of joy and a lot of inner peace, and is a cool way to move through the mountains. You can kind of, if you're going fast, you can go from point A to point B, or point A and point B can be a lot further away, and you can still do it in a day, and that's something that really motivates me, looking at maps, picking out routes I could do, and then going and exploring.
And you went for the FKT, so are you quite a competitive person, would you say?
I would say I'm a competitive person. I actually think it's funny, sometimes we like poo-poo competitiveness, but then, you know, even within trail running, people are like, oh, I'm not really competitive, it's more about just like pushing myself. And I'm like, then why do a race? And so I'm not afraid to say that I am a competitive person, but I think that's because it brings out some of the best parts of me. It allows me to push myself harder than I could otherwise, to be competing against other people, and in this case, competing against the clock and an existing time. Incredible mountain runner Emily Forsberg had the record on Mont Blanc before me, and so that gave me, you know, a pretty clear objective to go towards.
Fantastic. And what would you say has been your biggest challenge within the outdoors, and how have you overcome that?
I think it would be hard to maybe name one specific challenge, because, I mean, the outdoors is really challenging, and that's one of the things I love about it. But there are mental challenges and physical challenges. I think that one of the mental challenges, so as I mentioned, I came to running really following an accident, and regaining confidence in the mountains has been super important for me. And so that happens around trying to accumulate experience, trying to build my skill set. I'm incredibly lucky to have a husband who's a mountain guide, and we get to spend a lot of time in the mountains together, and he's kind of got, you know, an incredible pedagogy and skill set to help me bolster my confidence. But I would say it's always a work in progress. I think that another thing sort of with that confidence is also fear. Today, we see that the mountains are changing really fast, particularly in relation to climate change. And that means that there are some objective risks in the mountains that are new or developing, and dealing with minimizing risk and dealing with fear is something that's super, front of mind for me. think maybe that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So for someone who, say, is a runner but is not a mountain runner, how would you, maybe they find that fearful, how would you say, what advice would you give them to kind of overcome that fear and step up to that sort of challenge and that new environment that you've obviously gained such a lot from?
I mean, I think that the first thing is to realize kind of what I learned is that when we say mountain running, it's actually a misnomer. And that you can go out. It's really more about moving quickly and efficiently in the mountains. And so somebody who's going out for their first trail run should not be afraid to walk. They should completely embrace varying their speeds according to, what kind of terrain they're on and how they're feeling. And I think something else that's really important and what dictates part of my relationship to the mountains is that I don't just go there to go fast. Mountain running is, sometimes for me it's about performance, but most of the time it's about enjoying an experience and stopping and sitting down and looking around and making sure that you find the right balance between being in your body and experiencing like how you push yourself, but also appreciating the incredible environment that we're lucky to be able to move through.
And do you tend to run as a solo, or do you like to do it as a group, or?
I do the majority of my training by myself, in part because a lot of when I have sort of specific training, nobody really wants to do that with me. Also, I do it at kind of sometimes particular times of day. But I love both. I love being able to share an experience, but I also really like solitude in the mountains. And there's something that you can gain from being out there on your own and really being aware of your surroundings. But being with other people is incredible too, because as we know in other mountain sports, being in a sort of a harsher environment strips everything else away. So you can kind of easily get into like the essence of, who you are without like sort of the superficial stuff around it.
Fantastic. And your FKT is obviously being made into an amazing documentary, which we're so lucky to have here at Kendal Mountain Festival. Why do you think events like this and documentaries like yours, it's so important to share the adventure with stories like this?
Well, I can speak for myself for a minute why it's important to me. One of the things about my practice and the way that I approach projects is that I've increasingly tried to move away from almost like a consumerist approach where, you finish one thing and then it's like, what's the next thing? I like to take time to enjoy and savor and like remember things, and getting to share my experience is extraordinarily rich because it means that I get to keep enjoying it and I don't necessarily have to be chasing after the next thing. I get to continue to live that. And so that's really special for me. But I also know that coming to events like this and getting to see other people sharing their stories is extraordinarily inspirational. I can learn so much from hearing about other people's stories and getting to watch them process their own adventures. So sharing the adventure is something that is both for the individual, I think, who's sharing and for, the audience who gets to benefit from that sharing.
Opportunity to reflect and inspire. Is there anything that you're specifically excited to see at the festival this year?
Oh my gosh, looking at the program is actually incredibly overwhelming. At Kendal Mountain Festival, there's so many things going on and so many incredible things. It's almost like, a disappointment because you can't get to everything. One of the things that I love, though, is the mix of both adventure and endurance and also, sort of cultural events and arts and literature. And I've actually been a really big Robert McFarlane fangirl for a super long time. And I just got to watch a talk with him, and that's just very exciting.
He's incredible. Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us at the festival. Thank you, Hillary.
Thank you so much for having me.